Okay, welcome to our online lessons. Today we're going to start talking about logical reasoning, how we interpret observations. Quick little review of what we've done previously. We talked about the idea that different worldviews have used different sources of knowledge to interpret the observations that we all make about the universe. We talked about how in the ancient world, tradition was the primary source of knowledge that was used to interpret empiricism. We saw that there was a big paradigm shift with the Greeks, and they replaced tradition with rationalism as their primary source of knowledge, and along with empiricism. And then during the scientific revolution in Western Europe from about 1450 to 1700, there was another huge paradigm shift where where empiricism, that is observation, replaced rationalism as the primary source of knowledge, but the two worked together. We saw why it took so long to do this, because empiricism as a source of knowledge has some definite problems. One of them is the idea that the senses can be fooled. And we saw how scientists have learned to overcome that by relying on multiple observers, making multiple measurements, or quantitative observations, relying on numbers rather than just on appearances. The second problem was that the senses are limited, so there are a lot of things we can't observe directly. And science has overcome this problem by building scientific instruments, from microscopes and telescopes to particle accelerators, that all extend the senses. And another way that we've overcome that is by relying on relationships, where we can use properties that we can observe to deduce properties we can't observe. Today, we're going to look at how that second source of knowledge for science, rationalism, works. Now, before we get started, a few general words about what we call rationalism or logical reasoning, or sometimes commonly today called critical thinking. Reasoning does not guarantee that our ideas are true. Remember, we live in the internal subjective universe where we try to create a picture of our external objective universe that is an accurate one. But what reason does for us, what rationalism does for us, by combining it with our observations, it actually gives us reasons, which is why it's called reasoning. It gives us reasons to believe that the ideas we have in our heads actually matches what really exists in the external objective universe. In other words, what logical reasoning does is it allows us to see the external objective universe as it is, not as we wish it were. And that's important because, remember, the external objective universe, as we're certainly seeing now, can kill us. So we need to understand what's really going on out there. Now, critical thinking or logical reasoning is hard. That's because the natural human impulse involves a couple of things. First of all, we tend to make decisions based on incomplete evidence. We're impatient. We want to know, not only do we want to know answers, we want to know them now. And so our tendency is to jump to conclusions. Logical reasoning requires that you slow down, withhold judgment until you have a sufficient degree of evidence that you've analyzed properly. The second human tendency is to make decisions based on emotion. We tend to believe things that make us feel good. We tend to believe those things that we want to be true rather than the things that the evidence says are true. And so there are two real requirements for being a reasonable human being. The first one is what I'm going to introduce to you here, and that's the ability to think critically. There is a right way to do it, and this can be learned. The second requirement is something that is up to you. It cannot be forced on you, and that is the willingness to think critically, to say, yes, I'm going to set aside my natural impulse to jump to conclusions, my natural impulse to believe what I want to be real, and I'm going to go where the evidence takes me. Okay? So in the next lesson, we're going to look at the two basic types of logical reasoning.